Oh, can't you see the little turtle dove sitting under the mulberry tree? See how that she does mourn for true love, as I shall mourn for thee, my love, as I shall mourn for thee. Oh, fare thee well, my little turtle dove, and fare thee well for a while. For though you go, you'll surely return. If you go 10,000 miles, my love, if you go 10,000 miles, 10,000 miles is very far away for you to return to me. You'll leave me here till I mention well a day. My tears you will not see, my love, my tears you will not see. The crow that's black, my little turtle dove, shall change its color white if I prove false to the songbird that I love. The noonday shall sound as night, my love. The noonday shall sound as night. Shall fly, my little turtle dove, and the roaring billows burn before my heart shall suffer me to fail, or I a traitor turn, my love, or I a traitor turn. The stars shall fall, my little turtle dove, and the rocks melt with the sun. If I prove false to the mother that I love, till all these things be done, my love. Till all these things be done.
Hello, everybody. I'm Kay Michael. I'm one of your hosts for this evening's book launch, and I'm a co-founder and co-editor of Letters to the Earth. It was exactly 2 years ago when a small group of us issued a call out to the world. We wished to see what a creative response to the climate and ecological emergency could be, and to give everyone the opportunity to express themselves. What followed was an outpouring of emotion, of grief, love, anger, and courage. Within 1 month, we received up to 1,000 letters from all walks of life and from all kinds of perspectives, not just human. People have continued to write and share their letters, finding solace in the community that it brings. Tonight, we're gathered to celebrate the launch of our paperback book, which is just a small collection of the letters we received, and also the launch of our campaign for the year. A lot has changed since the early spring of 2019 when we issued our call. 2020 and even early 2021, as we know, has been a time of sadness and loss due to the coronavirus pandemic. While many of us have been grieving the loss of loved ones, our freedom, our old lives, the climate and ecological emergency has continued to quietly cause devastation and remains the biggest long-term threat to our safety, our health, and our security. 2020 was the hottest year on record, and scientists warn that temperatures will continue to rise, causing our planet to become increasingly unfamiliar, unpredictable, and in parts uninhabitable. For many, the pandemic has happened alongside extreme weather events. Wildfires in California, made worse by global heating, drove people from their homes. The 2020 Atlantic hurricane season produced 30 named storms, and flooding in China caused $32 billion worth of damage. Terrifyingly, the Arctic sea ice is melting faster than the worst-case scenarios predicted by climate models. The Arctic itself has been described as being in a death spiral. Last September, a chunk of ice measuring 110 square kilometers broke away from the Arctic's largest remaining ice shelf. Last summer, there were wildfires in the Arctic, and loss of ice in Greenland broke previous records by 15%. Every year, until we reach global net zero, the CO2 in the atmosphere goes up, and so too the temperature goes up, and so this continues. Many of our Earth systems are now unstable. We are approaching dangerous climate tipping points. 150 species are going extinct every day, and our encroachment into nature has led to our current pandemic. And whilst this pandemic has dominated the news, many of the chilling and sinister geological events that have happened have been pushed out of the headlines and out of the forefront of our minds. The Earth, however, has been self-evidently sick. How do we come to terms with this crisis, with these crises? How do we stop ourselves from getting stuck in despair? Letters to the Earth is open to interpretation. We invite writing that could come from a personal place, it could be dramatic in form, or even a call to action. It's an opportunity to pause, to ask how the environmental crisis affects the way we wish to live our lives and the action we take. Now, tonight we have 9 authors from our published book joining us to read their letters live. We hope they'll provide food for thought and inspiration as we look to the future. We have with us Ben Okri, Anna Hope, Stefan Rhamstorf, Mary Heglar, Farhana Yamin, Benedict Winter, Isabel Bruning, Simon J, Claire Roussel, and special guest Michaela Loach. And first up is Ben Okri. Ben is a Nigerian-born British poet, playwright, and novelist, winner of the Booker Prize Fiction in 1991. Recently, his Grenfell poem on Channel 4 YouTube received more than 6 million visits, And tonight, I'm pleased that Ben will be reading us his letter, The Age of Catastrophes. Over to you, Ben.
Dear Earth, give us the suffering we deserve. The pandemic you sent us is a sad beginning. Too often, we have been saved by the benevolence of the universe. When salvation comes easily, we do not learn. We only learn through suffering. We have become too spoilt, too stupid, too self-regarding. We fancy ourselves as gods, but we are children of death and immortality. We are nothing but wonder woven into mortal flesh. It is time for our flesh and our dreams to be tried. It is time for us to undergo the greatest initiation that we have undergone together as a species. And it's an initiation of fire that brings us humility and illumination. We will not transform ourselves and be worthy of this fabled earth if we aren't raised up in some way. The only way is to temper us with fire and with iron and with love. I do not wish suffering on anyone, but the human race has failed in that solemn responsibility to fructify and enrich the earth, to add to her beauty and evolve with her towards the fullest human possibilities. We're not currently rising up to the greatness of the wonder woven in us. We think we're only flesh, and so our dreams are only of profit and dust. We think that there is no force anywhere capable of chastising us for our cruelties to the earth and to one another. Our wars, our racism, our sexism, our injustices, our proliferation of poverty, our tormenting of the environment. But there is a force which science does not understand. It is threaded into life itself, into the laws of physics and metaphysics. Some call it karma. I think of it as a natural tendency of the universe towards balance and harmony. This force is implicit in things. What we do will be done to us, the good and the bad. This baffles science. It confounds those who only wish to see with the eyes. But we are in an age of catastrophes. We initiated the catastrophes. We will receive what we are worthy of, receive it with lamentation and self-judgment. Dear Earth, you inspire our dreams and our art. You feed our bodies and our souls. You house our bones when we are gone. You are one of the terrestrial planets made of the matter and magic of countless stars that have lent you their magnificence, that you may gift it to us. Dear Earth, look kindly upon the folly that is the human race. Teach us with your silent wisdom how to live again, how to be simple again, and how to rise to the greatness and sense of universal justice that is our divine inheritance. Yours lovingly, Ben Okri.
Wow, Ben, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to hear your letter read in full. We know that you read a snippet of it this morning on Radio 4, and in its entirety, it's such a compelling piece. And as you say, the pandemic has caused great suffering, and we could go into whether that suffering has been deserved for all humans or not. But what I'm interested to ask is, what signs of healing and restoration can you see as happening as a result of this current initiation? What are we learning, if anything?
I think we human beings are slow learners. But when we do learn, we can act very fast. There's two sides to this. I keep saying there's the miraculous side to us, and then there's a side to us that's sort of inclined towards keeping things as they were. But we can't do that anymore. We have to accelerate our learning. We have to accelerate the change, the adaptation, the transformation that is absolutely necessary right now to the human race. So if you ask me what signs there are, I would say these letters are signs. The responses of young people throughout the world are signs. A whole new generation are passionate and astounded that we've come to this pass, and passionate about wanting to do something about it. We have a new government. In America, we have the Biden administration in America, which in itself is a moment of great hope itself, because America makes a great difference to things like this. So there are signs of hope. But we need to accelerate that, and events like this, I think, can be extremely instrumental.
Well, it's good to hear that there is some hope for you. And I was going to ask whether you think it's, the change is happening quickly enough, but it is, sounds like you see it is accelerating. I think you're right with the movements politically that are happening. We will be asking others later if they agree with your view. Just finally to ask, it's such a beautiful thing you say, to live simply again. What does that mean to you, to live simply again?
Oh, I to me personally, I think it's not living an inflated life, which is what we've been doing for the last, 50 to 100 years. We are overspending the resources of the earth, and we are damaging its fragile balance. Living simply could just be that everybody does their bit, really, towards helping the environment. I like walking. It's one of the reasons I don't have a car. I can buy lots of cars if I want. There was a time when for 10 years I didn't fly, and I certainly intend to fly a lot less. I think the pandemic has given me a lot of cause for a lot of thought. There are many ways. I think we've just become a little bit too swollen. I think our egos have become a bit too bloated. There are things that we do that we think we can do that we can't do without, and it's not true. Governments can use a lot less electricity, a lot less fossil fuel in the lighting of buildings. There are all sorts of ways in which we can live simply and actually add to the beauty and richness of our lives. It's not a very difficult thing.
No, I hear you. I think we are seeing some signs of that simplicity occurring during these times as well. Let's hope it does continue. Ben, thank you. It's a real pleasure to have you here with us this evening, and do stick around if you can to keep tuned in. Thank you, Ben.
It's an honor, and thank you for your extraordinary initiative.
Thank you, Ben.
Bless. Bye-bye. Looking forward to the others.
Me too. Well, it gives me real pleasure to introduce our next author, who has been at this with us, with Letters to the Earth, right from the beginning. I'd like to introduce Anna Hope. Anna Hope is a co-founder and co-editor of Letters to the Earth. So she's been by my side for some time with this. And she's also an author in her own right, has 3 novels, Wake, Ballroom, and Expectation. And I believe there's a new novel coming soon. And Anna is joining us this evening to read her letter, Fracture. So over to you, Anna.
Thank you. It is the year of fracture, of starting to understand. It is spring. I write in a wooden cabin at the bottom of the garden with a view over the pond. The dragonflies come there. There is flag iris and gunnera. There are newts. I have a daughter. She plays in the garden. She loves the sandpit. She's 2 years old. I am writing a book, researching for a story, and one bright morning I type in a phrase, "How long till societal collapse?" And then I read about locked-in tipping points, the non-linear, graphs that are jagged, saw-toothed, unpredictable, terrifying. I look out at my daughter, to where she plays in the sand. All spring, as the world greens and blooms, I try to talk about it, this new story, which has fractured my sense of what a story should be. And people listen and nod and agree and glaze a little, but mostly say, yes, I know it's terrible, but it might not happen. It might not. But the spring becomes summer and the summer is hot. We drive to the coast and eat on the beach and swim and agree. It's amazing, this weather, to be able to plan things, to be able to say, let's meet on the beach next Friday. Our children love the warmth. They run around with nothing on. We grow used to it. We look at each other and smile and grow brown and happy in the sun. But the sun does not cease. The garden grows brown too. The gunnera grows crispy and dies. The pond dries up. Where do the newts go? They have disappeared. We agree it would be good to have a bit of rain. The rain does not come. The year turns, becomes autumn. Each morning it seems there's more bad news. 12 years to change course. The insect apocalypse, they've gone apparently, while no one was looking. Disappeared. No one knows where. It's November and dark at 4 o'clock. The year is contracting. There is fear in the house. I read paper after paper, papers that tell us we may only have 10 years left, that we should start to prepare, to adapt, to imagine starving to death really quite soon. I have a friend who's staying with me, and she and I stand in the kitchen in the dim mornings and talk in hushed voices as though afraid of being overheard. What would we do if it came to it? She's a doctor and she mentions cyanide. And when she talks of cyanide, I keep seeing that bit in Downfall, the film of the last days of Hitler, where they're all in the bunker and they know it's the end, and Goebbels' wife is putting the cyanide pills in her children's mouths while they're sleeping and then cracking their jaws to release the poison. Crack, crack, crack. The look on her face, all of them in their little bunks. I think, are we really talking about this? Standing here either side of the butcher's block, two middle-aged, middle-class women talking about the possible end. I look at places online, Wales, Connemara, places with water, with rivers, a well. I say to my husband, we have to buy land, sell up, go to Ireland, buy some acres, learn to farm, bore holes, all of that. My husband shakes his head. He does not seem afraid. He says, we have always lived in uncertain times. I had therapy once when I was trying to have a child. I tried to have a child for years and years, and sometimes I would feel aberrant outside of nature. And sometimes I would wonder if this is how the earth felt, old and sad and sick with grief, struggling to bring forth life. Anyway, this therapist, I said to her, I love my mother. She is amazing. She's an earth mother. She baked and she cooked and she made us and she held us. And she looked at me, this therapist, and she nodded in that way they have. Mothers have many sides, she said. They're not just benign. Mothers can turn, be jagged, saw-toothed, unpredictable, furious, uncontainable, unreliable. Mothers can turn. I've begun to pray. I find myself praying by trees on the earth. I lie in my bed with my daughter beside me. I like to sleep beside her these nights, to feel her animal warmth. She should sleep in her own bed, but it's nice like this, burrowed down together, as though we are in a den and she's a cub. Outside, beyond the windows, the owls call to each other over the dark fields, hunting in the night.
Wow, Anna, thank you so much for reading your piece. It's really so special to hear it voiced by you, and from the very location actually that you write of in your piece. It's quite special.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
It's quite a raw and haunting piece of writing, and quite incredible almost how prophetic it is when it speaks about the uncertainty that you were experiencing 2 years ago, and also when you talk about the mother turning, you know, we really are experiencing, I think, Mother Earth turning on us or on the world, on herself right now. And I'm just wondering, the fear that you speak of is so apparent for 2 years ago. There's clearly fear in you when you wrote the piece, but how does it feel to read the piece now, 2 years on?
It's interesting. I mean, it feels very raw, and as I go back to it, I can feel that fear for my little daughter, and feel this sort of sense of culpability that I felt so strongly. You know, this kind of moment, almost of not awakening, but you know, there was a before and after for me in 2019, but I would say that has changed and been tempered by lots of things, but you know, this campaign was a huge part of that, actually. Taking that fear and trying to put it into action, and connecting with UK and the other women that we set this up with Jo and with Nimi and Grace, our editor, and you know, and just being changed by reading other people's words. And I feel it again tonight, seeing everybody. It's profoundly moving to be part of a community who, you know, because for so long it felt as though we couldn't talk about this. I felt as though I couldn't talk about it, and suddenly there was permission. And I feel as though that permission, you know, has been amplified, and we're all having very different conversations, really, from the ones we were having 2 years ago, and that feels good.
Yeah, even in the difficulty, we're still having conversations. They're just, yeah, like you say, different, evolved, braver, perhaps, more connected, perhaps.
I hope so, yeah.
I have one final question for you, because you call 2019 the year of fracture. And after the year we've had of 2020, I wonder what you feel or hope might be the year 2021. Would you have a word for it? Does a word come to mind?
You know, I'd hope that it could be the year of healing, and I'm holding that in my heart, but there's a lot to heal. And there's a long way to go, but it feels as though, I think what Ben was saying was so, I'm holding that, actually, you know, that we are slow learners, but once we learn, you know, we can move quickly. And I feel that, you know, I feel that as well in the kind of in speaking to younger people. And so, yeah, I'll just say healing and hope for that.
Well, that's a really good word to come to. I hoped that it may have been something along those lines. So thank you, Anna, so much. Do stick around if you can. And we look forward to your novel soon, when that is coming out. Listen out for it, audience.
Yeah, it won't be so soon, but
soon. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
Well, Letters to the Earth uniquely brings together novelists and poets with politicians and nurses and scientists too. And we have a few climate scientists in the book, and I'm thrilled that next up we have Professor Stefan Rhamstorf. Now, Stefan Rhamstorf is a German oceanographer, climatologist, professor and head of Earth System Analysis at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research. I highly recommend following him on Twitter. Now, his work focuses on the role of ocean currents in climate change, both past and present. And Stefan will be reading his piece, False Alarm. Over to you, Stefan.
False alarm. Sometimes I have this dream. I'm going for a hike and discover a remote farmhouse on fire. Children are calling for help from the upper windows. So I call the fire brigade. But they don't come because some mad person keeps telling them that it is a false alarm. The situation is getting more and more desperate, but I can't convince the firemen to get going. I cannot wake up from this nightmare.
Wow, Stefan, thank you. I almost feel like it's such a short yet shocking piece, and what you have to say, that I could hear it over and over as almost a recurring nightmare, a necessary nightmare. I wonder how things might have changed for you 2 years on as well, because we're now in a place where perhaps the firemen are on their way, and many feel that climate action is happening. Ben spoke a bit earlier. Biden's been elected, COP26 is going ahead. Now, you may think or even know otherwise. So I'm interested to hear what other message there might be right now that humans aren't aware of or aren't hearing, like the firemen you speak of. And if what you've just read was your letter to the earth, knowing that you work with oceans, is there a message from the ocean right now? Or is there anything else that we're not hearing that we need to be as humans?
Well, I wrote this because for by now about 30 years, I have been, in addition to doing my scientific research, I have been dealing with climate skeptics, or you should really call them climate deniers. And that's what I'm referring to, obviously, with these people that ring the fire brigade and tell them not to come, where we are in urgent need, of course, for action. And it's delayed again and again by lobby interests. I do feel in this year and the last year, I feel a lot more optimistic. And the main reason for that is the Fridays for Future movement, fantastic worldwide youth movement that has in many countries, I'm sure, and certainly in my home country, in Germany, really changed the discussion, the political discussion. It has changed the voting behavior. And I think these young people, they will keep going. I think they won't get pushed aside by the Corona crisis. They are still organizing online if they can't do street demonstrations. And so I am actually in a new phase of optimism right now. Now, your question about the message from the oceans, I could give a whole talk about this, of course. The oceans are a very crucial component of the climate system. They absorb about a quarter of the carbon dioxide that we put into the atmosphere. Without that, global warming would be progressing even much faster than it already is. But this carbon dioxide in the ocean that is dissolved in the upper ocean waters forms carbonic acid and leads to ocean acidification. And that actually is really compromising marine life, all these microorganisms that make microscopic calcium carbonate shells that are at the basis of the food webs in the oceans. Also the coral reefs, all these calcifying organisms, they are crucial for life in the ocean. And we are in the middle of a major coral reef, dying, I have to say, worldwide. I have been in Australia for 6 months as a guest professor there, and the Great Barrier Reef in Australia is severely damaged, already about half of it. So the oceans really need our attention and our care, and they have to be center stage as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's important, I think, for us to continue to hear those messages from many, many parts of nature, and the oceans being such a vital part, as you say, in the role that they play when it comes to carbon emissions and soaking them up, for lack of a better phrase. But Stefan, thank you for telling us a little bit about the work that you've been doing. I want to ask, what do you think, if scientists, because your piece for me expresses a frustration that a scientist is unable to have his voice or his message heard, and maybe that is changing, as you say. But what more do you think we need beyond science, beyond even the strikes that you've been talking about with the youth strikers? Do you see maybe my question's a bit leading, because here we are gathered around poetry and writing and art. I wonder, as a scientist, what you feel the potential is, if there's yet more to be found in how art can play its role in whether it's communicating science or supporting scientists like yourself with the messages that you have.
I think art is incredibly important for this, because as scientists, we always have to be very sober. We have to present the facts, the data, curves, and so on. And the psychologists are telling us that this doesn't actually reach the people. You have to reach people on an emotional level in order to really motivate them to make the changes that are needed. And I'm not referring necessarily to make them just in their private lives, because I'm of the conviction that it's really mainly a political problem, a societal problem, and not a kind of individual consumer thing. But we have to motivate people on an emotional level and make them understand what is going on an emotional level. And therefore, we just need artists.
Well, thank you, Stefan. I mean, I'm always pleased to hear someone say that. And I do feel, and I think you'd agree, that much of the writing that we're hearing tonight does speak to people on an emotional level. So it'd be really interesting to hear from the audience out there watching. Please leave us your comments. It'd be really lovely to hear how this is landing for you. Stefan, thank you. It's a real pleasure to have you here with us, calling in from Potsdam. And please stay. Do continue to tune in to listen to our upcoming authors. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I'm delighted to invite a special guest to join me now in introducing our next couple of authors. Our guest is Michaela Loach. Now, Michaela Loach is a climate justice and anti-racism activist, co-host of the Yikes podcast, and a fourth-year medical student at the University of Edinburgh. Yikes is a podcast which leans into the yikes of the world, rather than letting them overwhelm us. Now, they might be from the climate crisis to racism to activism and resisting oppressive systems. In it, Michaela breaks down the issues in an accessible, intersectional, and nuanced way to guide us towards action together. Michaela, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And actually, Yikes Season 3 came out today, if anyone wants to have a listen. Just cheeky promo. I'm really honoured to be here, and it's been amazing to hear everyone's letters so far, and I'm really excited for the letters to come as well.
Thank you so much, Michaela. Well, I'm really glad to hear about your podcast. So everyone go out and listen to that after this. And Michaela, I know it's been a busy time for you, and especially as a medic in particular. And I just want to ask, because you, I'm sure, have seen a side to the pandemic that many of us haven't. And we heard earlier Ben speak of the lessons that we can take from the pandemic. So I'm wondering, what do you think the pandemic is trying to tell us right now? Is there a message in particular that you think we need to hear or that is coming through in this particular moment?
Well, the pandemic has impacted all of our lives in so many different ways, and in quite ways that will never go back to normal. And I think that one thing I've definitely learned is that normal was never okay in the first place, and we shouldn't have been as comfortable with normal as it was, because what we saw as normal, and when we're wishing to go back to normal, is a time where oppression exists and impacts people. It's a time where we're exploiting the earth and the resources in this earth, and we're exploiting other human beings. I think that during this time, I've realized how often my own privilege has made me wish to go back to this state that was actually harmful in the first place, and how instead we should ask for more, and we should use this as an opportunity to imagine a completely new future, and that can be really, really beautiful. And then also from a climate perspective, looking at how we've responded to the pandemic, and especially being someone who has been on the front lines, I guess, in many ways, and I was vaccinated very quickly, and seeing how we've managed to make a vaccine from the start to the end in such a short space of time shows that when there's the willpower, we can create significant change, and we can make huge things happen that we would have thought were never possible. And so when it comes to the climate crisis, we can have so much hope that these solutions that we talk about are well within our reach. All we need is the willpower, and we can create change, and we can kind of create this new world that we want to make.
It's so great to hear you say all of that. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's really beautiful actually to hear so many of our guests this evening speaking of that hope and of that potential for change and possibility being within reach for that, if we do keep working together. So, and that's what Letters to the Earth is all about, and why we've invited you to join us, because we do want to see how, we do believe that this year is the time for really collaborating and reaching out beyond all the sectors and spheres that we're operating within. So really thank you for joining. And I'm really delighted to hand over to you as host for the next couple of authors. So I will let you take over, Michaela.
Thank you so much. You've been doing an amazing job as host, so I'll try and carry on as well as I can. So I am delighted to be introducing the wonderful Farhana Yamin. So Farhana is an environmental lawyer, author, and activist. She has advised leaders and countries on climate negotiations, law, and strategy for 30 years. She is widely credited with getting the goal of net zero emissions by mid-century into the Paris Agreement. She received recognition as number 2 on the BBC Women's Hour Power List of 2020, with the judges describing her as a powerhouse of climate justice. And she'll be reading her letter, The Age of Restoration.
Oh gosh, thank you so much, Michaela. It's wonderful to have you, and a wonderful opportunity to meet just some of the authors. Many of us met last year when the book came out and had some in-person events, but it's really nice that the paperback is now out. So I'll read mine. I hate actually reading. I wish we had one of the nice artists, many of the wonderful artists and the actors who are part of Culture Declares Emergency reading this, but here goes. Dear Earth, as one mother to another, I want to apologize for the mess we humans have made. In just a few hundred years, we have burned down your forest, poisoned your waters, acidified the oceans, melted glaciers and ice caps, and managed to upset the delicate chemistry of the entire atmosphere. But here is the good news. We've already worked out you are 4.6 billion years old. We've gone to the moon and Mars and sent messages deep into the universe to tell everyone about life on Earth. Something magical is happening too. Millions of ordinary people, especially our children, are rebelling against the old ways of thinking, ways that led humanity to death, destruction, and the glorification of domination of nature. We finally understood that everything and everyone is connected. We've understood that ending domination of nature goes hand in hand with tackling all forms of domination and hierarchy. The struggle to honor you, our shared home, and to achieve ecological balance and justice goes hand in hand with achieving racial, gender, sexual, and economic equality. These struggles are linked, and the movements to achieve them need to join up and overturn the prevailing order. That is actually quite a leap in understanding. It's happened because we've allowed our creative curiosity to see you, dear Earth, and ourselves with new eyes, to see your abundance and how it could be used to provide for the needs of all and not just the few. More power from the sun hits you, dear Earth, in a single hour than humanity uses in an entire year. We are trying to figure out how to harness this through solar panels and renewables, so we no longer have to rely on digging up coal, gas, and oil. Once we have this power, we can generate and store clean water, so no one has to face drought and famine ever again. But we can't get to that point till all of us unleash our imaginations. Too many people are panicking and either looking to the past for solutions or see salvation just for a few. It's bizarre that it's easier for us to put a man on the moon than imagine a kinder, inclusive, and more equitable global society here on Earth. I am certain that in the end, those who are panicking or trapped in the past will not have the upper hand. There is hope in the millions rebelling all over the world. Our artists, indigenous people, wisdom keepers from myriad lineages, young and old people everywhere are forging new alliances, networks, and coalitions. They are figuring out how we can care for each other, even if the benevolent life conditions you created for us get harsher. It's an exciting time to be alive. to witness the conscious co-creation of a new era of humanity. Bear with us, dear Earth. The age of restoration and respect is almost here. Thank you.
Oh, Farhana, thank you so much for sharing that with us. I love what you said about this conscious co-creation of a new era. That's such a beautiful way to put it. And as you said, the pandemic has revealed our intimate connection with each other and nature. And we know that humanity's domination of nature, which, as you said, is linked to so many other forms of domination, including colonialism, has led to this situation. And in turn, the pandemic has laid bare our own structural inequalities. So if what we're in right now, it has the possibility of being this turning over of the prevailing order with the Black Lives Matter protests in the summer and the current farmers' protests in India, Arundhati Roy described the pandemic as a portal. So I'd love to hear what you feel are the lessons that we could learn from this time in particular, as I know that this is a different time from when you wrote the letter in the first place, and how can we move towards this new world?
Yeah. I totally love Arundhati Roy, and she said, actually, I think it's now in 2003, I'm getting a bit old, another world is possible. I can hear her, if you listen quietly, I can hear her breathing. It's more or less the quote. And I feel that we've already walked through the portal. So many of us are walking through that portal of a better world. We've rejected that. And I feel that this interconnection between the different movements, which were operating in very different sort of silos and focusing on their own struggle without understanding or recognizing, or just being bogged down by the day-to-day politics, turf funding, all of that stuff that goes on. They've really understood and have come together, which doesn't mean that, it's all game, set and match over. It isn't. It is a bit like tennis. It's right till the last point, there is everything, to play for. So I feel very buoyed, actually, especially by seeing what's happened with Black Lives Matter, by seeing the Green New Deal, which only 2 years ago, rebels, sunrise movements, young people were, taking the offices of the Democratic Party and, having a sit-down protest and getting arrested. So these rebellions have really changed the conversation. They've really made us conscious. And I think COVID, in a bizarre way, has exposed, all of those inequalities. People can see them. They're talked about day to day, whether it's now the vaccinations, which won't be rolled out to the rest of the world, until 2022, 2023, and which jeopardizes all of the things that we want to do and which we want to do sort of collectively to, all the air pollution, and which makes respiratory illnesses worse on top of all of the inequalities. So I feel like there's a massive learning that's happened this year, and it's not going to go away. And I think Stefan was very right in saying, the young people, I'm so buoyed to see you here, articulate, doing your professional training and far more eloquent. I read your Insta posts and they're like, wow, that's just so simple and well said. I don't need to write nerdy books anymore. There's a whole generation of new people who are, stepping through and making that portal so much more attractive.
I love that so much. And that quote from Arundhati Roy, the one about the new world breathing, that's something that I hold really close to my heart. And I say to myself, like, when in this world currently do I hear that new world breathe, and how can we lean into that breath, and how can we become that breath and become that hope? And I think that you are that hope in so many ways. And I want to thank you for your work and for sharing that letter with us. Thank you so much for that. And we're now going to move on to the next letter. Thank you, Farhana, for being here. Sorry, I'm just trying to host. So the next person I'm so excited to introduce is Mary Annaïse Heglar, who is a climate justice writer and essayist. She is the co-host and co-creator of the Hot Take newsletter and podcast, which is one of my favorite podcasts and newsletters, which takes a holistic, humorous and humane look at the way the climate crisis is covered in the media. She'll be reading her letter, but the greatest of these is love.
Hello, thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm well, thank you so much. I'm so excited to have you here, and I'm really excited for you to read your letter because it moved me so much.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I guess I should do that then, yeah? Okay. But the greatest of these is love. It's finally happening. We're finally talking about climate change. It's messy, but it's happening. To be honest, we don't really have the language, and that's largely because we don't know how to feel about it. For decades, the dominant narrative has been that we should feel guilt. Then there's the dual narrative that calls for hope. Others have called for fear or panic. I myself am on the record calling for anger. But we don't always feel angry. But I don't always feel angry, to tell the truth. In fact, sometimes I'm hopeful. Sometimes I'm scared. Sometimes I'm overwhelmed. And sometimes I'm downright stubborn. My mama would tell you that's pretty much all the time. That's because none of those emotions really get to the heart of what I truly feel. None of them are big enough. If I'm honest with myself, what I truly feel is love. Hear me out. I don't mean any simple, sappy kind of love. I don't mean anything cute or tame. I mean living, breathing, heart-beating love, wild love. This love is not a noun. She is an action verb. She can shoot stars into the sky. She can spark a movement. She can sustain a revolution. I love this beautiful, mysterious, complicated planet that we get to call home. The planet who had the audacity to burst with life from her boreal crown to her icy toes at the South Pole. I love her caves and her valleys and her rivers and her oceans. I love the majesty of her larger-than-life elephants and whales and rhinos and lions. I love the elegance and enigma of all the different kinds of bats, even the bats who eat other bats. I love the unapologetic sass of butterflies and hummingbirds and coral reefs and the tear-jerking aroma of flowers that bloom below the equator. I love that nighttime symphony on steamy southern nights when the frogs croak and the crickets sing and the owls hunt. I love the taste of watermelon and blackberries in the summer, the way they ooze down the side of my face when they've reached perfect ripeness. I love the delicate feel of honeysuckle petals and the warm, grainy earth and dewy grass on my bare feet. I love sitting on my mama's back porch in Mississippi to watch God do his work in the form of late summer thunderstorms underneath a thick blanket of humidity. I love the late summer haze when all the colors come to life and seem to throb. And I love my mama. I love my family. I love my niece and nephew. And I love that it doesn't matter that their parents are actually my cousins and not my siblings. I love that I love my Aunt Joyce's laugh and my cousin Candace's freckles and my Aunt Karen's voice. I love, dare I say it, myself. And some days it's easier to do than others. Sometimes it feels impossible, but it's a work in progress and I'm working on it, okay? A love like this doesn't live in your heart. She's too big for that. She's in your blood, your bones. She's in your DNA, the places where people think racism is. She envelops you with an impenetrable armor. When you love something or someone that much, of course you're frightened when you see her under attack. Or of course you're furious at anyone or anything that would dare to harm her. I'm furious that my mother is more and more danger every hurricane season. And I'm terrified of the thought of living through my old age when my body aches the way my mother's does now in an unpredictable environment with disaster at every turn. What happens when my knees don't have enough spring left in them to run from a wildfire? What happens when I've lost all in a flood and I'm too old to work again? But this love is strong enough to break through the terror. She's hot enough to burn through the anger and turn into fury. She can shake you out of your despair and propel you into the front of the battlefield. It's a love that can also, even in the teeth of the most insurmountable odds, give me hope, if I'm brave enough to accept it. I've seen her looking back at me in the eyes of some of the bravest climate justice warriors I have ever met, and I can feel the tickling tingle of maybe, just maybe, we'll be okay. A love like that doesn't seek peace or even vengeance. She seeks justice, and she's strong enough, ferocious enough, brave enough to burn this bitch to the ground.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was so beautiful and so moving. And the first time that I read your letter, I actually had a wee cry on the bus to work. But I also laughed, like, I love the end of saying burn this bitch to the ground, because that's the energy we need. So I would love to ask you, because I think that your letter talks a lot about community in many ways, of like loving each other, and that being a motivation for caring for the planet and for wanting to do this work. So I'd love to ask you, in these times where we're separated from each other, maybe physically in this pandemic, how can we still unite together, and how can we still form community when we're up against all that we're up against? And how are you trying to do that?
Yeah, that's really hard. I don't know that I found the right answer to that. I think it's more of like, it often feels impossible, because at the exact same time that we need community, all of us feel very emotionally drained. I know that I do. So it's very difficult even to keep in touch with like my closest friends. So I think that right now the work of community kind of has to focus on yourself and figuring out like, if you are able to give to someone else, and also giving one another grace when we're not able to give to one another right now. And so I have all of my friends have had kind of these sort of conversations of like, I'm not holding anything personally against you. I still love you. I understand that we're all running on empty right now. And when we're able to be together again, I will be so happy to see you again. Also, I think social media needs to become a kinder place. Sometimes it feels like it does become a kinder place, and then sometimes it feels like it becomes way more vicious. But it really is like our town square at this moment. It is the place where we get to actually be together. And so trying to be kinder in those sorts of spaces, which I don't think I always succeed at. I don't think anyone always succeeds at, but it's something that I think we should try.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can relate to both of those sentiments of social media can be this great place for us to unite together and still be able to be together when we're apart. But also there are points at which maybe we're all frustrated and stuck at home and can get on each other's nerves a bit too much.
Right.
I'd love also to just ask a bit about what is giving you hope at the moment, because like hope is an action in so many ways. And I just love hearing from people what gives them hope. And I'd love to hear that from you.
So I struggle with hope. It is not one of my biggest motivators. It's kind of like, to me, hope is like a bird that comes and sings by your window. And when it's there, you listen to it and you hold on to it, but you know that it's going to fly away. And hopefully it'll come back, and maybe it won't. So to me, it's more about what gives me motivation and what gives me inspiration. And to be real right now, that is just pure spite. And I've been having a lot of like climate rage, and I've been taking it out on social media on fossil fuel companies.
Love it. We love it. That's like my favorite content is you trolling the entire fossil fuel industry.
It is. It's my passion these days is to cyberbully Shell and BP and Exxon and all of these other places. And honestly, it's been, believe it or not, a way to create positivity on social media, because we've all got this bully that we can unite to beat up. And it's so much better than having people harass women scientists on Twitter, right? Like, I firmly believe that Exxon should have a bad day every day on Twitter, as opposed to, women scientists who are like, maybe nuclear is not so bad of an idea. I have way more venom for Shell than I do for someone who thinks maybe we should look into nuclear. So yeah, that's where I've been finding my inspiration and my motivation. It's just like dogged determination and a little bit of rage, a lot of rage.
I love that, because I think that we need to be able to express our rage. Rage is a very real and important emotion. And maybe if we're feeling frustrated online and we want to take it out on someone, maybe within the movement, we could direct it at Shell or another fossil fuel company instead. That's some great advice.
Yeah, I highly recommend it.
Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing this with us. It feels kind of surreal to see your voice come out of your face, as I listened to your podcast many times. But it has been an honor to hear you speak, and thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good day or night where you are. Yeah,
it's night.
Thanks so much from me as well, Mary, and Michaela too. Mary, I think you're absolutely right to be doing as you're doing with Exxon, and we will all join you in that social media battle. And thank you, Mary, for joining our town square here on this live stream from across the pond. Huge gratitude. And Michaela, it's been a real pleasure to have you with us. We know, like I say, you've got an awful lot going on right now with your studying and putting the world to right, as we all are trying to do. But it's great to be connected and to be connecting activists together like this. I'm really glad to have been able to introduce you to the people here, and let's hope that these connections can continue to grow. And thank you for what you're doing on the front line. I know it's not easy over there, so.
Thank you for having me, and I really enjoyed sharing space with all of you, and this is a really beautiful kind of space, and it's given me a lot of motivation, so thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the letters.
Thanks, Michaela. Well, Letters to the Earth is always looking forward to hearing new voices, so we hope that there may be a letter coming from you too sometime soon. That would be lovely, but you've shared some brilliant messages this evening that we're all going to take to heart, so take care and enjoy the rest of this evening. Thank you, Taylor. So next is a video that we asked one of our authors to prepare for us, and it conveys the love he has for nature, a very special part of nature in his back garden. So this is from Benedict Winter, who will join us for some closing remarks at the end of tonight. But for now, this is his letter to his walnut tree.
Dear Mr. Walnut Tree, I would like to apologise on the behalf of mankind for ruining your beautiful earth. I would also like to thank you for holding strong and even managing to hold my weight year after year. Thank you for being such an easy to climb tree, and thank you for being there whenever I have needed you. I would also like to say sorry on the behalf of my dad for leaning the old fence against your trunk. I hope you don't mind me swinging on you all the time. I'm sorry for carving my initials at the very top of you with my penknife. I shan't do it again, I promise. Just a quick question. Were you planted, or did you just grow naturally? If you were planted, when was it? And who did it? I'm sorry for not maintaining a clean and tidy space around you on the floor in the garden. And the most utterly sincere apology that I would like to make to you today is that I'm truly sorry for letting my mum pay that stupid old man to come along and chop your head off last year. I hope you enjoy your current position in the garden, and if you don't, please feel very free to ask to be moved. Thank you for not dying, even though you live next to 2 apple trees that I'm not even sure are still alive. Let's just call them apple-producing zombie trees. To conclude, I would like to say don't die. Carry on living, bold and strong for as long as you possibly can. Yours sincerely, your climber.
So I'd like to introduce one of our authors, Isabel Bruning, to join me now. She's an educator who's worked all over the country for a wide selection of well-known environmental charities. And instead of reading her letter, we're going to talk about her work, bringing children into the wild. Isabel, thank you for joining us. It's really great to see you here. Where are you calling from today?
I'm in Cambridgeshire at the moment.
And how is it over there? Has the snow thawed?
Yes, it's getting much better. We've even managed a coffee outside in the garden today.
Oh yeah, good. Yeah, me too. I had a lovely breakfast out on the balcony, which was, the start of spring, perhaps.
Let's hope.
Let's hope. Though I did hear there is a cold spell coming, so we'll see. But, you wrote a letter for us that in the book is called A Letter to the Dying. It's a really tender and honest reflection of your struggle back when the news of climate collapse, I suppose, hit you in 2019. And your love of nature in it is so beautifully expressed. You speak both with joy and difficulty. You speak of the difficulty of introducing nature to young people when the future for both nature and young people is so uncertain. You say you're not sure if you've done the right thing in showing children nature, though, in your letter, when it's so vulnerable. And so I'm just wondering if that feeling has changed for you.
Yes, absolutely. I think when I wrote that letter, it was coming from a very dark place, clearly. And also, I think I wrote it with kind of a sense of anonymity. So in a lot of ways, it was more of kind of a scream into the void, if you like. And normally I try to be a lot more measured in the way I talk about the climate, especially to children and young people. And I think that that's definitely a good thing. It's not necessarily any more honest, I don't think, to just share that negativity and fear just because I've had the opportunity to do it here, when the positives and the hopeful side of the situation are just as real and just as true and deserve to be communicated, especially to young people.
Now, how old are the young people that you tend to work with?
I've worked with all ages. At the moment, I'm seeing more teenagers, GCSE and A-level students I've been working with. But yeah, at the time when I wrote the letter, I probably was seeing younger people more.
And I imagine that your work's been quite impacted by the pandemic. So you would normally take children out to experience the outdoors. So how has that changed for you? And how do you see the impact of those changes on the young people as well?
Well, it's cancelled. So much as, yeah, it's not so much impacted as just not happening at the moment. So, yeah, I haven't really even seen any students to tell you how they're getting on, but I know it's going to be very important as we start to get into this, hopefully, time of healing that some of your other authors have been talking about. Finding a way to return to the outdoors is going to be really, really important for young people, I'm sure.
What are you in particular missing from the work that you do with young people outdoors?
Oh, I miss my groups. You know, I get so used to having like a class of 30. You can hear their little voices even when you're not in the room with them. Yeah, it's a hard thing to do without for a year.
Well, I wanted to ask, what do you think from your experience of working with young people, especially outdoors as you do, what do you think they need most of all, especially right now, and to help us find our way out of this crisis?
I think that you see a really clear divide in the children who are used to having the opportunity to be in nature and kind of aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. And then those children that really haven't had that at all. And I'm nervous when they get off the bus and say to me things like, "Oh, miss, are there going to be bugs here?" And are they going to get their trousers dirty? And I think that so many of those people just have had so little exposure to nature, they don't even have a chance to know what they're missing, which seems so unfair to me because it's such an important part of my life, at least, to have that access to nature, that to think of children growing up without that opportunity is really heartbreaking. So, yeah, I think just that chance to access nature is so important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's even beyond this moment of the pandemic, there's still a great injustice or a great divide between those that do have access to green space or even feel safe or feel that they can step into green spaces. So there's a huge amount of work to be done there, and it's an issue of justice, really. Isabel, thank you for sharing with us what you're up to, and we've deliberately left the letter elusive so that people are inclined to pick up the book and have a read. And I do really recommend turning to your page. And it's worth noting that Letters to the Earth is currently putting together some education resources for young people that can be done either at home or in the classroom or outside. And we hope that it is a way for young people to build that relationship, that necessary relationship with nature, as you say. And we know that it brings and gives so much, and really, I think, is part of that healing story and that restoration story that's coming through this evening. Isabel, thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Well, we have hundreds of people watching, I've been told, across all of our platforms. We've got some really great comments coming through, so please do keep writing and sharing your comments as you're hearing the letters. We've had a comment here from Isabel Clark saying, "Thank you, Farhana, for what you've had to say. A good point about why the moon when we haven't got Earth right. It's still all about big business and profits." Says there's much love for Farhana, what you've been saying, and that we are in possibility right now, says Deborah Curtis, in great agreement with you. So keep your comments coming in. And next up, I'm really, really delighted to introduce Simon J. So Simon J is a writer and performer from South London in Edinburgh, and he has created several shows for the Edinburgh Fringe and works with charities to promote creativity in underrepresented communities. And Simon will be reading his letter, We Don't Shop at Waitrose. Thanks, Simon.
To my baby nephew, Max. When I was little, 2019 sounded like a year so far in the future that we'd never actually get there. But here we are, and so soon. When you're my age, it'll be 2050, the middle of the century. Do you imagine that there'll be flying cars and we'll be living on the moon? I really want that to be your future, one of love and adventures. And I'm sure it will be. Human beings are resilient and magnificent animals that are capable of so much wonderfulness. It'll be harder for you than it was for me. I don't want to scare you, but I'm scared that we've hurt the planet we all live on. I hope you're angry at us. I hope you resent us for not doing enough and that we've made an enemy of your future. No, I don't want you to feel that. I want you to think that we were stupid and idiotic from the viewpoint of a more advanced age, like how we laugh at people from the Middle Ages for thinking that the Earth was flat. And I hope your conspiracy mad dad doesn't think it's flat by 2050, but there's no guarantee. It might not count for much, but I want you to know that I care about what's happening to the planet. I feel like we're stuck inside the jaws of a big, horrible monster whose spiky teeth are like the bars of a prison. I don't know how we get out. I'm trying to help, so it's not as bad for you. Others can't face it, or feel powerless to protest, or actually think it's a fight we're made to feel guilty about. That guilt is because we're not rich, Max. We don't live in posh houses, we don't speak proper, and we certainly don't shop at Waitrose. It's called being working class, but that's a vague term. What I mean is that our mums and dads work all day to make sure we have food and clothes and telly, but that's about it. And that's all day and every day for those basic needs. The ones fighting and telling our mums and dads off for not fighting, a lot of them have lived in posh houses and have been on lots of holidays. I'm being a bit silly, but they're normal people too. They can't help that they've had the accent of luxury and privilege, private healthcare, because their great-great-great-great-great-grandparents owned all the land. Sorry, your uncle's on his soapbox, but you don't need to know this bit. It just gets on my tits. But seriously, and it's pointless to blame these 100-odd big businesses for all of this. It's always people like me and your mum and dad who are called on to sort all this stuff out, while Lord Snootington gets all huffy at us for not having help sooner. The Prime Minister in 2050 will be begging us chimney sweep type people to sort all this out and do our bit, like your great-granddad did in the Second World War. But he and his kin were clever and said they'd only fight if they got to stand shoulder to shoulder with the snooty lot and get things like clean water and beds after they fought off a monster as bad as the planet-eating beast whose jaws we're now stuck in. I wish I was your dad rather than your gay uncle who lives in Edinburgh and never gets to see you. So I could really tell you about how we should love one another, and that love for our fellow humans is so important. I'm scared that the monsters like those your great-granddad fought will soon spring up everywhere and say that mummies, daddies, brothers, sisters and babies aren't allowed to live anywhere because their homes have been ruined by the planet getting too hot. They want to get rid of them, but we've got to stand up for those people. The norms would find this preachy, and under any other circumstances, I'd be bright red with embarrassment. I'm even writing such things. I love you. I love the planet, and I love humanity, and I want to have hope that we'll survive what we've done to it. We have to act on it. We have to talk about it. We have to protest. We have to. I don't know what else to say other than I'm off to try and help. All my love, your Uncle Simon.
Thanks, Simon, so much. Oh, and let's show the book again. We haven't really seen it yet. There we go. There we go. Simon, it's so lovely to hear you read your piece. You take us on such a journey, and I absolutely love the title that Grace, our editor, selected for your piece, We Don't Shop at Waitrose. It just, for me, encapsulates the feeling that you at least start with in your letter. Because you speak initially of guilt. That's what I hear initially, of being made to feel shame by people for whom action might be easy because of their privilege. And there's
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a sense of anger there, and that's justifiably so. And perhaps part of the universal justice that Ben Okri spoke about in his letter as well. But it sounds like the love the love for your nephew led you to overcome your embarrassment at writing this letter. And maybe the love for your nephew has led you to take action as well. I'd love to hear if that's the case. And I'd really like to ask you about this love. It's something that Mary spoke of as well, the power of love.
Yeah.
Do you think love is enough to break down the structural inequalities that you speak of?
Yeah, so much more than hate. I realised when I was angry at our politicians for their inaction and their stupidity and selfishness and short-termism, I wasn't getting anywhere. But as soon as I thought about the love of our planet, of nature, of our brothers and sisters and the human family and the animal world, that gives you so much more energy to engage, because there's nothing worse than people, at a party, when we used to have parties, someone up and go, do you know what, the sixth great mass extinction, people just turn off. But if you say to someone, well, very soon you're not going to have that, you're not going to be able to hug your daughter outside because the air will be choked, it's more about the things you love, I think. Yeah, that's what.
Well, let's hope that love does prevail, as Mary says in her piece too. I mean, what do you think? What more do you think the power of your love for your nephew can do? Do you see? Has it turned you to any kind of activism, or is there more that you feel that you or others can do, especially now?
I think just talking about it as part of your everyday life, as part of your everyday conversation, that this is actually something that is going to happen, that we've already passed some of those points, haven't we? That we're going to be living with we are living with the effects of climate change. You see, parts of the world on fire, and making it something that we can do something about, that there are answers, that it's not hopeless. Because I think once people think it's hopeless, they don't do anything. You just become helpless, I think. So it's things like that. I'm trying to talk about it in a non-preachy, embarrassing way.
And has that crossed the divides or the barriers that you've seen in terms of, you talk about class and you talk about identity in your letter? Do you feel that the love that you talk about and the desire for conversation, have you broken through any perceived barriers that you talk about?
Yeah, I think so. I think I remember having a conversation with a cab driver who was a climate denier at the beginning of the conversation, and then was really worried for his family by the end of it, when I just spoke about, what is going to happen. Yeah. So it does happen. I suppose it's like you said at the beginning of this, a couple of years ago, there was nowhere near this level of conversation about the climate crisis. It's something that's, even like the Daily Express has headlines worried about climate change now. I mean, what a change in such a short period of time.
Yeah, we are seeing great change, and that does seem to be quite a running theme throughout this evening. So let's hope that this galvanizes and gives us some hope for this year. But as is said by Joanna Macy in the book as well, let hope be active hope, that it turns into action. So Simon, thank you so much. It's an honour and a real pleasure to have you here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you. So next, I'm delighted to welcome Claire Roussel, all the way from South Africa. I say that because I'm speaking from London, UK. And Claire is an artist, writer, and researcher working at the intersection between activism and art. Hello, Claire. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, I'm well. What is the time now? How many hours ahead are you from me?
2.
So not too late, I hope. But Claire, you have a really interesting story behind your piece that you're going to read for us shortly. Would love to hear a little bit about the story behind the piece that you wrote.
So, I mean, the piece really stemmed out of an ongoing conversation with my flatmate. And I had gone on a journey of what turned out to be about 8,000 kilometers to meet people who were all connected with food and seed sovereignty, and who I felt were somehow living prefiguratively, somehow living in the future. And I was staying in a little cottage. It was the end of winter, and suddenly I knew how to say all the things that had come out of all those conversations. And wondering what the future people would think of us in this predicament that we find ourselves in now. Would they judge us? Would they be able to feel, sort of empathize with how unimaginably hard this time is, for all sorts of reasons beyond the obvious? Because I imagine that our deep ancestors drew power from seasonal shifts and from ritual and from an unshakable sense of belonging to each other and the earth. And I feel like on top of the horrors of climate change, we have so little of these things as well, that I would have imagined had formed the very ground of their lives.
Mm. And so this is still a project that you're working on with seeds?
In ways, always with seeds, yes. I work with a team of friends at a garden nearby where we run a box scheme, and we buy from small scale farmers and we pack it all up and sell boxes of vegetables and donate lots. Yeah.
Nourishing piece of art. Claire, your letter that you're going to read to us, it makes so tangible the people who don't exist yet, but who will in the future. And there's a real sense of them being here with us when in your piece. That this moment in time connects to the past and the future. So there's a real connection in time that you draw out. So Simon's letter just now has said how he hopes the future resents us for not doing enough, and that they think that we're stupid and idiotic. I'd love to hear your letter to see how you think the future will look back at us. So over to you.
What we do now matters. They are wanting to tell us something, the future people, the people of whom we are the ancestors, yet they are the wiser. They are wanting to tell us that what we do now matters. They want us to know that they see the dismembered ways that we live and how difficult it is for us to remember how to return to the family of all things. But their existence is testament to the fact that it is possible. They know we feel trapped by this system of entanglements and obligations and the amputations of our imaginations, in a system that only ever intended to keep us blind to the bars of our cages. But they want to remind us that there was a time when we could not imagine a world order that was not based on the divine right of kings. And before that even, there was a time when we knew what it was to belong. When we knew that we were Eland, Mantis, and Dancer. When we knew that we were the firefly and the ocean, the stuff of stars and the breath of birds. They ask us, stroking our hair and touching our faces, how did you know that something else was possible? Where did that idea germinate inside of you? Show us, point to the place. Tell us the story of summoning your brothers and sisters to revolt for a life of connection and dignity. For what dignity is possible if dignity is not available for all? They ask us, how did you manage to build this world in the flames of capitalism? And yet all the while you were disconnected from your rituals, from the rhythms and songs of your people, the tiny sacred acts of care that ensure that the world is recreated with every dawn chorus. How did you handle knowing all that you knew without becoming paralyzed with terror and despair? What did you do with your despair? Personal, collective, ancestral? How did you carry its magnitude in your heart without becoming overcome with madness? Or perhaps while carrying your madness, your addictions, and your chronic sadness, never really knowing the full extent of your vitality? Did you carry pieces of it with you everywhere you went, stuffed in pockets and purses like used tissues, pulling out every pot and pan as the house flooded with tears? Did you feel it hanging in the air and walking alongside you? The ghosts of extinct creatures following you around, reminding you of all that is at stake, suffocating you with the thickness of their memory. Did you taste it in your food, forced from the soil and sea with chemicals and violence? Food that no longer nourished, but flared up in rashes and welts as it entered your body. Did you feel the suffering as you dressed yourself in the forced labor of people and animals? Their exhaustion stitched into the seams and hems of your clothes. We see you, they say, standing on the shore with 500 years of industry and environmental wreckage and slavery and torture at your back, gasping under its weight with only the vast Black Sea in front of you. We see you. We see you holding the crumbling world in one hand and the germinating seed of life in the other. We know you are listening to your children, to the wind, to the birds, to the voice that startles you from sleep just before dawn, to the harbingers of a new consciousness. We feel how you allow your heart to be broken while every day preparing the house for love, making up her bed, setting a place for her at your table, all with no good reason for hope and every reason to despair. We see what is to come for you and what will remain when the storm from which there is no refuge is over. We see you in the thousands of varieties of potato and corn and wheat, the cornucopia of culture and craft, language and art, the compassion and commitment to the value of the life of the individual and the group. We know what you have known across time and species, across geography and incarnation. We know what you are capable of. We salute you. because what you do now matters.
Well, Claire, thank you so much. It gives me goosebumps every time I read or hear your letter. It's so powerful, and what you say of the future generations saying back to us that they know that we are listening, and I feel that really captures actually what at the heart Letters to the Earth is about. That the many people who are putting pen to paper, there's a deep listening going on. And if we can keep tuning in, keep listening to what the birds, the trees, the oceans are saying, then there may be a shift. And so I really want to thank you for your inspiring call to, from the future, to say, it reminds us that we are on a path and we're still on that path. So thank you for being here with us this evening as well. I'm really wanting to welcome Benedict into the space as well, to join Claire and myself. Benedict, we saw a video of your letter to your walnut tree, and I just want to share with you, we've had a lovely comment come in from someone watching. Phil Richmond said that he loved that video of yours, Benedict, and he says, if we could all write letters to our trees, what a better world we would live in. So there we go. We've also got some gorgeous comments in here. One from Azul saying, thank you, Claire, for touching a deep place in me of remembering through time and grief and matter, mother. How I love that word, she says. Thank you, Azul, for your comments. Beautiful. Now, Benedict, the letter we've just heard explores a sense of connection to the future and past generations. And so I want to ask you, Benedict, as the youngest author in the room here today, if there's one thing or if there's a message that you'd want to tell Claire and myself and the other adults in the Zoom room and all those adults watching right now, what would it be? What is your message, oh future generation? What do you have to say?
Well, I would just like to say thank you for inviting me, and I think that everyone thinks that it's hard to be good and eco because it's expensive, but like in a lot of cases, it's like you save money being good for the environment. So people just need to focus on the little things that can help, like just switching off your heating could make a big difference, because that can be the biggest the worst thing that you could be like emitting from your home. I think that planting your own seeds instead of buying packaged goods from the supermarket is like another big point. Because over lockdown, I have planted a few and ate a lot of our own homegrown food, and that through this lockdown, my walnut tree has helped me through and kept me sane. And that I think people think that it's hard to be good for the environment. And whenever we see on the news anything to do with climate change, polar bears are always on the front cover. And we find it hard to believe because, like, I don't know many people that have seen a polar bear in their life, so we can't really relate. But hedgehogs in this country is like our equivalent. Since 2000, we've lost a third of the UK's hedgehogs and 90% since World War II. And they're on the brink of extinction. Like within 5 years' time, they could all be gone from the UK. So I think if we all did our bit and kept the ecosystems going and grew our own food and spent more time outdoors and just switched off the heating and wore more clothes instead and did every single thing they can, it would just make everything better, and every little helps to just keep the planet going.
Benedict, thank you so much for your message. It's you're right to give us our own our own message from our own species here. When I say we here in the UK, the hedgehogs, it's an incredibly important message to hear of the species on our doorsteps that are suffering, and to know that there is hope in the actions that we can take, as you said. And so we all have a role to play. Benedict, thank you so much for joining us and for putting together again your video, and good luck with all the seeds that you're growing. I'm glad to hear that you've had that joy during lockdown, and so do keep in touch. Thanks, Benedict. Well, that brings us to a close for this evening, and I'm so glad to have heard, Benedict, from you as to some tangible outcomes, some tangible things we can take away from this evening, some practical things, as well as some movement in the heart, I think, too. We've discovered that for many, putting pen to paper can be a first step to discover what's important for you, how the earth might speak through you, how you can speak and act on the earth's behalf. So to everyone watching and to all of our authors, keep writing your letters, write them and share them with others. Send them to people in positions of power. Open up vital conversations about what we do next and what's to come, what the future can and must look like, and the future must begin and does begin now. I hope this evening has been an inspiration to everyone out there. It certainly has been for me to hear from our authors. Thank you to everyone that's joined us. It wouldn't be a book launch if I didn't direct you all to buy a copy of the book. Unfortunately, our authors aren't available to sign, as we're all calling in from many multiple places. But Letters to the Earth is out today. All proceeds go towards continued campaigning for environmental justice. And you can go to bookshop.org or our website, letterstotheearth.com, where you can also find out more about our campaign this year and how you can be involved. And especially if you're a school, we have some exciting resources coming out soon. So our email address is on the website. Please do get in touch. You can subscribe to our mailing list. You can make a donation. And keep an eye out for an exciting interactive letter writing experience next week for everyone to get involved with our author, the actor Freya Mavor, who is a new addition in the paperback book with a beautiful letter too. So be on her Instagram, so do follow Freya Mavor and keep connected. You'll be able to find news about that next week. And keep connected via our hashtag Letters to the Earth, and you can share your letters through that hashtag too. So finally, I'd like to say a massive thank you to all of our authors. I think you're all there. We can see you all. Thank you to Ben, to Anna, to Mary, Farhana, Stefan, Benedict, Isabel, Simon, Michaela. Thank you for joining us as a guest, and everyone behind the scenes, John, Miranda, Vlad, Kelly, Gabby, Penny, Jamie, and everyone at Culture Declares who have supported us in hosting this event this evening. Do please check out Culture Declares Emergency, especially if you are a cultural organisation or an artist. At culturedeclares.org, you can find out how you can be part of a community for making change. Now, it's been a pleasure to be here with you all this evening. And on behalf of the Letters to the Earth team, a big thank you to our authors for your inspiring work. So thanks, everyone, and a good night. And before I go, I will also share with you here the book, and I will leave you with our trailer for the book to play us all out. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Our Earth. When I stop and listen, I can hear your ice caps melting. It's a bit like free-running dominoes, like paddling bathwater with one's toes, like an elongated sigh.
Sea levels are rising. Forest fires are scorching.
What words describe this crisis? How can we process what is happening to the world?
Dear mortals.
Dear fellow citizens.
Dear artists and writers.
Dear Earth.
I want to tell you how amazing you are, beautiful and funny.
Letters to the Earth is the beginning of a new story. These are letters of love, loss, hope and action from all of us.
You may think that you are simply one small positive droplet that can't do anything.
but together you form a sea in an ocean. That sea can stir a storm. That sea can make a change.